Hi, this is Steve Adubato. Recently, I had an opportunity on behalf of the Lessons in Leadership team to interview my sister, Michele Adubato. You may ask why. Well, she's the president and CEO of the Northward Center, a not-for-profit organization started by my dad back in 1970. It's based in Newark. It provides social services to a range of organizations, to individuals in the community in Newark. So while it's about leadership, my sister Michele also experienced COVID close up. She had one of the worst cases anywhere. And she suffered through it, and she talked about it candidly. She talked in this interview about the impact it's had on her leadership, on her view of the world, and why it matters that she gets a message out to everyone. So while it was taped in connection with Lessons in Leadership, we thought it would be totally appropriate for UNCUT. So without further ado, Michele Adubato, UNCUT. This is an interview I've been wanting to do for a while. Please welcome back to Lessons in Leadership, Michele Adubato, the Chief Executive Officer of the Northward Center, an organization our father started in 1970, if I'm not mistaken. Michele, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
I have an important question to ask. You are in your home, correct?
Correct.
I do not see a picture of me behind you. Can you please explain the reasoning for that?
I think your face is splattered all over the place anyway. Who needs to see a picture, right?
I am sending a signed autographed picture to you today, my sister Michele, my younger and more talented sister Michele. Hey, listen, you know, you actually did a Lessons in Leadership segment with us right before things got crazy with COVID. And we never aired that interview, and your life changed dramatically early on in this pandemic. Yeah. When you got the virus. Describe not only, well, we'll talk about the impact that your serious illness had in connection with the virus on your leadership, but talk and give people a sense of how bad it was.
It's almost indescribable. When you ask to describe it, you're asking to describe something that you never thought in a million years that, you know, you would go through. It's not even the fact of how sick I was, which I was, you know, as you know.
You're in the ICU for many days, on the verge of being put on a ventilator. And full disclosure, I was talking, we all in our family spoke to the doctors every day, 20 times a day. You're in serious condition.
Yes. And, you know, the feeling back then in March was, you know, shock is an understatement. You're in a hospital where, you know, normally if you're in a hospital, you know, you hear people and you hear rustling about and people are walking in the hallways. That's not the case. That was not the case. Everything was quiet because nobody was there, because only essential workers were there, meaning the nurses and the doctors. And, you know, every so often, probably about 4 or 5 times a day, I'd hear the code. And I learned to figure out what that code meant. And that code meant that somebody was dying. Somebody was being put on a ventilator. And, you know, I had found out that the 2 people were not put on a ventilator, myself and someone else. And everybody else on the floor was on a ventilator. To say that that was an eye-opening experience is an understatement. And, you know, it was an experience certainly I'll never forget. And it has changed my life.
How so?
My life. Well, I think you learn who the people are, that you learn to live with yourself, if that makes any sense. I never put a TV on. People are like, what did you do all day? I'm like, I was trying to survive. I was literally trying to move. So I learned a lot about myself. I learned, quite frankly, how strong I could be. I learned who cared. And by the way, most people did. Most people do. I learned about my family. I learned about what was really important in life. I learned that those days, those times when I was almost, you know, having a very difficult time breathing, I learned why I had to breathe and why I should breathe and why just moving my toe meant something. And it was a long recovery. People were,
It continues to be a long recovery.
it's unbelievable. I just don't think anyone understands, unless you've been through it, what it means to recover from this. Like, so when you have COVID, you're in emergency mode. You're just, and I mean serious COVID, and I'm not underestimating when people are home. I'm sure they feel horrible. Well, times that by 10 being in the hospital, and whatever I was going through, somebody else was going through something worse. But being in the hospital is one thing. You're just trying to survive. You're trying to survive. You're trying to breathe. You're trying to move. I mean, my pulmonologist, who I learned to hate, believe it or not, and I said, I really don't like you. He goes, my job is not for you to like me. My job is to get you to breathe. He was screaming and yelling at me, you know, breathe, or else we're going to have to put you on. I had a big blockage in my lung.
I know.
So that was about breathing and surviving. And then when you got home, it was a completely different thing. You felt horrible. You couldn't move. You were tired. And mentally, the mental toll and emotional toll was just, it was devastating. It really was. And without the people around me and without my family and purpose, I don't think I would have made it. And when I say purpose, I mean, you have to have a reason, real reason, and understand why you're here. My family's been wonderful.
Let me clarify something. The North Ward Center, an organization our dad started in 1970 that Michele leads today, is a multi-service, not-for-profit organization based in Newark, New Jersey that does, and by the way, their website will be up, check them out. Michele and her team, they do extraordinary work, and they make a difference in the lives of people who are the most vulnerable. Let me ask you this, because this is Lessons in Leadership. How do you believe your very personal and painful experience with COVID has impacted your leadership?
Well, I made a promise to myself and to my staff that I would never ask anyone to do something I wouldn't do. And I think that that's something that really affected me in terms of, I think there's a lot of people talking right now. What we should do, we should go back to schools, we should reopen the economy. And I don't take any of that lightly. And I understand, you know, the reasons for doing, you know, for people saying what they're saying. But until you go through it, until you're there, whether, you know, again, varying levels of what people have gone through. So when I decided to open the North Ward Center, it certainly was an agonizing decision because I don't want anyone to go through what I went through. So I am very protective of my employees and the community and what that could mean, regardless of whether they understand what it means to them or not, if that makes sense. Because I don't think that people have, it seems as if people haven't gone through it, they're kind of like, yeah, if it happens, it happens. No, it's not that simple. It really isn't.
How has, because right before we did this interview, or we started our part of the interview, I watched you struggle with the technology. Apparently it's a family trait. So my question is this: you're a really hands-on, in-person, engaging person. And that's, you know, our father was that way as a leader as well, only, let's say, a bit more aggressive than the two of us, which is hard for our staffs to imagine. That being said, how hard has it been for you to be a remote leader and communicator?
I think that, you know, you're absolutely right. We're hands-on people. You know, we like to get in there, and you know, I missed that aspect of it. And you know, when I did decide to begin to reopen the North Ward Center and just begin to have meetings again, some meetings, by the way, in person. And when I say in person, we're in a huge tent. We're like,
you're outside meeting.
We're outside. I have meetings outside. I tell people I wear t-shirts to work, you know, like it's going to be 95 degrees.
By the way, we're taping on August 13th. This will be seen later. I'm going to see Michele running an outside meeting in November. She'll probably do it.
I'll have my coat on.
I think she's going to do it.
I will. Up until the end. I'm going to be
whatever that is.
No.
Exactly.
But
so you do you appreciate the in-person, outside, under the tent communication more than you ever have appreciated interpersonal communication before?
Well, here's the thing. What I learned is to get to your point. If that, like, don't beat around the bush. You don't have time for it. So get your point out, get what you have to say, and none of this small talk stuff.
Are meetings shorter? Are meetings shorter than
Much
these?
shorter, much shorter, much shorter. And I'm the
How
one
long
who,
were our dad's meeting? When Steve Sr. had a meeting, how long would they go on?
oh, endless. My
Who
meetings
would
are
do most of the
short.
talk?
Listen, I'm the one who goes, I'm the one who says, I've had it, I'm done.
I know. I'm sorry. By the way, Mom's going to be mad at us for saying that Dad ran a long meeting that he did all the talking for. And I'm going to blame you for that, by the way.
First of all, I would not call that, I don't think technically that was a meeting, it was a lecture.
He used to call a meeting going to church.
Church. Our dad would say, you're going to do what I tell you to do. That's his meeting.
That was his. He said, "What are you writing this book, Lessons in Leadership, for? Just ask me. I'll tell you what it is." That being said, I'm going to try this in the limited time we have. By the way, Michelle's also going to be joining us with Marsha Atkin from the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey and Councilman Anibal Ramos on our sister public television platform, talking about a whole range of issues as well. But this is focused on leadership. Let me ask you this. You're an impatient person. I am an impatient person. We're impatient leaders. We have a sense of urgency, sometimes appropriate, sometimes not, even though we're not the same exact leader. Are you any more patient, or are you less patient because of your COVID experience?
It's interesting. I wrote that word down, patience. I wrote it down. I write it down a lot.
Hey, hold on. Wait a minute. You didn't answer the question. Are you saying you have to practice patience?
I do. I have to practice patience. It doesn't come natural. I have to, not just patience. I think the word is impulsiveness too. Sometimes I could be a little impulsive in my actions. And
no way.
You're better. I have to tell you, you're better at that than I am. That's for sure. But
well, our staff is all of our producers and our team. They're like, are you kidding me? How bad must the rest of the Adubatos be?
I actually write that word down. I actually, before I go into meetings, I talk to do that self-talk. Michelle, listen.
How does it help you? How does it help you?
It does help. It does help. So I think one of the things this has definitely changed for me. There is certainly a sense of urgency. But within that, you have to afford and allow for that patience for people to get where you're at, or they're going to teach you something that you need to learn about this. And so I do write those words down and I practice it. And I think I'm a bit better. Now, maybe my staff just fell over.
Yeah. Keep practicing. Hey, listen, one of the key chapters in Lessons in Leadership that Michelle has read 4 times so far. I charge her every time I send her a book.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That being said, one of the chapters is great leaders are lifelong learners. And it's another way of saying, look, I didn't write the book Lessons in Leadership to say, wow, I'm such a great leader, do what I do. Half the book is about screw-ups, mistakes, things I wish I hadn't said or done. So anyone who says, yeah, how could he write that book with all the mistakes he makes? That's the point. Lifelong learning as a leader means you make mistakes and you learn from them. I wish more of our public officials would practice that and others. But let me ask you this in that spirit.
About practicing our public officials, they need to also practice, vulnerability and not thinking that they have all the answers. And I think it's one of the things we need to, really be honest with ourselves, is that we may not have the answer.
And it doesn't make you less of a leader if you're not, when someone says, I'm smarter than the generals, I'm smarter than, no, you don't have to be the smartest, you have to be the most effective. By the way, I'm running out of time, Michelle. Last message to everybody. Go ahead.
Here's my message, and I'm going to say this. I have to say this to you. You were my rock. I'll never forget it. You're my big brother, and I love you. You were my rock. You were the best. I had to say that.
You weren't supposed to do that.
Yeah, I practiced that too without trying. But you
weren't supposed to do that. I love you, Michelle.
Love you right back.
Sorry for doing this all publicly, everyone. I'm Steve Adubato. That is the much tougher, stronger Michele Adubato, and we'll be right back after this.
you.